Here today, I'm working with a group called Fix the Debt, Louisiana's chapter of it. There are 22 other states that have chapters of a national coalition of partners, including business leaders, former elected officials, current elected officials, and concerned citizens. Over 300,000 concerned citizens from around the country have signed a petition asking Congress and the President to work together in a comprehensive and responsible way to move our debt in a downward direction. And to do that in three distinct ways: to look at generating the appropriate amount of revenue to do that, to rein in spending, and to reform entitlement programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. For the average Louisianian, this is important because Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are a part of many of our citizens' everyday lives. They're critical services and programs that are important to their well-being. And if we don't do the right things with those entitlement programs, it's going to make it impossible for them to be there for future generations of Louisianians. For today's children, these programs just won't be viable when they need them in 40, 50, 60 years. And so in order to address our growing debt problem in this country, we as an organization recognize that we've got to do these three distinct things. That one action alone won't be sufficient to deal with this problem, that we've got to generate revenue, deal with our government spending and ensure that that's done in a responsible way, but also look at these entitlements and make them function the way that they should so that they're viable in the future.
And what are we doing here today?
Today we're kicking off the Fix the Debt Louisiana chapter with a teleconference that's going to go out statewide, and also gathering with local folks who have agreed to serve on the steering committee and to work with this organization in the coming months and years to address the problem of the national debt, recognizing that there will probably always be a national debt, but that there is a way to get it moving down on a downward trajectory so that the percentage of our public debt to our GDP is in a more reasonable range. And thank you all for being here. Thank you for joining us on the phone. I know that everyone's so busy and has so much going on with their business and otherwise, and I think it's just really wonderful that you were willing to spend some time with us, either on the phone or here in person with us, to talk about this important initiative. You know, there are over 300,000 people from around the country who have signed on to the Fix the Debt Coalition's agenda and asked for Congress and the President to work together to take a comprehensive approach to doing three really significant things. And one is to take a look at generating the appropriate amount of revenue to do the things that government needs to do, to invest in the things that we need to invest in, reforming entitlements, and also reining in spending. And what Fix the Debt Coalition recognizes is that in order to have a meaningful impact on our debt, we need to do all three of those things. One by itself is not going to be enough to get us where we need to go. Our debt is at an unacceptable limit. It's become a detriment to growing our economy. It's become a detriment to investing in the things that we need to invest in to move our economy forward. Certainly here in Louisiana, it's become a detriment to investing in port infrastructure, dredging, other important activities that move the economy of not just our state and our region, but also our nation. And so what we understand is that we need not a Democratic solution and not a Republican solution. We need a solution that works for the people of the United States of America, and that's going to take both parties working together. It's going to take Congress being willing to come to the table, and it's going to take the President being willing to come to the table and look at those big things: Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and making sure that they're viable moving into the future. It can't be highlighted enough that there are very impressive business leaders like the group that we have assembled here and also with us on the phone who have come to join this coalition and say, please be responsible, Congress, Mr. President. Please look at all the ways that we can get our debt under control and reduce the percentage of debt to GDP ratio that we currently have. You know, the fiscal cliff that we just passed up, that was a success. I think it was a success of this organization, which was pushing for for Congress and for the President to accomplish something with that crisis. But it's certainly not a time to do a touchdown dance. You know, I mean, They looked at revenue and they generated about $620 billion in new revenue. That's a piece to the puzzle. But it didn't get us anywhere on entitlement reforms, and it didn't do anything to really look at the structure of our tax code on the federal level to look at exemptions, look at loopholes, look at other ways that you can incrementally increase the right amount of revenue to the government and also make strategic investments and smart investments with our spending. This group is not really looking to come together to make specific and concrete things that Congress should or shouldn't do, investments that Congress should or shouldn't make, spending cuts that Congress should or shouldn't make. What we're looking to do is to say we want a common sense answer to these problems. We don't want you to overspend. We don't want you to make we don't want you to make drastic cuts to important programs for those people who need these programs the most. But we do want you to make sure that the vitality of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid is protected for future generations. And we also want you to generate revenue in a responsible manner. The way that Congress is currently operating, they're basically playing small ball. They're basically playing this 2-minute offense at the end of the game, trying to catch up and score a touchdown so they can send it into overtime. And they've set up these series of mini fiscal cliffs that they're going to be debating over the next year. We think that that's a bad policy. And so what I think the Fix the Debt organization can bring to the offense of our nation is basically a solid ground game. We're not going to just start throwing the ball because it's late in the fourth quarter. We're going to look at the right ways to accomplish things and move the ball down the field and do it in a responsible manner. So I'm very excited to be here with you and kind of speak on behalf of you as the steering committee. Can't wait to hear from you today, both on the phone and here in person, and really look forward to working with you in the short term and also in the long term going forward to try to take this reasonable approach to reducing the debt. So again, thank you for your time, and I really look forward to working with you guys. Thanks.
I think a lot of times, I think we frequently talk about the debt in the context of a budget, and we talk about a budget in terms of budget cuts. But I think that at some point in the national discussion, and I think it would probably be helpful at all levels of government, but at least since we're talking about the federal level at this point, I think at some point I'd like to see in this process a discussion about how the organization of government and how we perhaps can generate some efficiencies in operating by taking a look at the overlapping jurisdictions and functions and regulations and rules and procedures between the myriad of federal agencies that are out there right now. And if you Google almost any topic, whether it's coastal restoration or healthcare or whatever, you will find that there are several federal agencies, generally speaking, that deal with the different issues, and each one has their own process, their own rule, their own regulation. And I can't help but think that there could be some economic benefit, some economies of scale, if we would perhaps look at that structure and see if we can't do a better job of streamlining the process and being able to maybe combine some of the functions of these agencies and generate some savings there. But anyway, I think the discussion is very timely. I think it's a good project. The thing that I guess attracts me the most to it is that it's designed to be nonpartisan, and we need more of that in the discussion of just about every issue that we're facing as a nation.
These last few years especially have really highlighted how this has really just devolved into a constant bickering match, and we really haven't seen any movement to really change anything. Like Representative Leger said, the going past the most recent fiscal cliff at the end of the day was a victory because movement happened. But at the same time, there's been nothing accomplished to address the greater issues, such as entitlements, such as spending, such as, in this state we struggle all the time with our tax credit issues, with what actually generates revenue and what is just a giveaway. And until those greater issues are dealt with, and until the partisan bickering stops, I think Norma Jane really touched on something really interesting. One thing Walt and I have in common early on is we're both, I would say, proteges of John Breaux, former Senator John Breaux. And one thing that really highlighted his political career was that he was someone who brokered compromises that moved DC forward. And in the partisan debate that's taken over this country, there aren't any more John Breaux. And everyone is kind of forced to pick a side in this greater battle, and the fights are largely political, and people aren't looking at the greater goal, which is to move the entire country forward. And I think that's reflected in the fact that Congress is at its lowest approval rate in the history of this country. So going forward, it's my hope that with this organization we can work together to try to get them to focus back on what's more important, which is taking care of the country's business and not the party's business.
What kind of plans does the organization have to get this message to Washington?
The organization is really focused not necessarily on individual policy or agenda items, but instead to grow grassroots support for the concept that our president and that our Congress need to reach across party lines, sit down at the table, and negotiate big, broad, long-term deals to get our spending under control, to put our revenue streams in a growth posture that will provide the types of revenues necessary to run our important government services, and to deal with those important entitlement programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We just want to put the pressure on Congress and the President to understand that we don't see this as a partisan issue. We see it as a national security issue for the future, that we need to do these things to have the type of government that we all demand, and we want to encourage and support them in coming together and compromising to reach these important long-term goals.
Overall, I thought the session was very informative, and I'm looking forward to learning more about how to work towards solving probably our nation's greatest challenge.
I think it was really inspiring to know that individuals are working to try to make the country a better place, to make sure that we're not concerned about who's a Democrat, who's a Republican, but just to do good, to save our country and make it just a wonderful place.
The debt is something that we have to face, we have to resolve. One of the main issues that we discussed in the meeting was the political parties coming together and resolving that, build up the confidence of the public, and work together to reduce it. But the only way to do that is once again coming together. That'll build the confidence of the public, and all the capital resources right now that are being held without spending, you'll see a lot more investments going on.
What's your reaction to the efforts by the committee?
It's fantastic. I think the efforts, it's a ground group. I think the initial meeting went well. There's more meetings coming up, more input, more suggestions, but I think everything is initiated by grassroots efforts, which is what the meeting's about.
I think everybody, every citizen needs to be concerned. It is probably the single most pressing issue facing all of us as Americans.
What's your reaction to the work of the committee?
It's very promising. I think the most promising thing about it is that it clearly is bipartisan, and it's encouraging common sense.
I think New Orleans is as good a place as any to learn about how you can recover from tough times, and this is certainly a tough challenge, and I suspect we'll respond to it accordingly.
What are your biggest concerns when it comes to the national debt?
Overall, I guess twofold. It's unsustainable, and clearly it has implications for investment. As a parent, I want to make sure that I'm not leaving my kids more of a problem. I want to make sure I'm part of the solution.
And your reaction to Louisiana getting involved in this issue?
Positive. I think it's obviously a good effort. I think anytime we as citizens learn about what the issues are that we're facing and work towards coming up with cohesive solutions, I think is a positive.
I'm extremely excited. It's great to be part of an organization that's trying to urge Congress to do the job they've been elected to do, and to not use partisan bickering as an excuse to not accomplish what people of this country have always sought, which is to have a balanced budget, to truly deal with the debt issue, and to not use partisan bickering as an excuse to continue to kick the can down the road.
What's your reaction to what you've heard and seen in Washington on this issue?
I've been extremely disappointed. It seems like, especially the last 5 to 10 years, everyone's looking for short-term solutions that only seek to expand the problem, make it worse every coming year. I mean, the fact that right now we're having the same fight as we speak over the debt ceiling that we had a year ago, is really disheartening because it seems like people in Congress just don't understand what's at stake. And what's at stake is the reputation and the credit standing of the entire United States of America. And everyone's using these different parsing platforms to bicker and to fight, and really the entire country is suffering for it.
What kind of an impact do you see is this here in Louisiana?
Well, I think when we look at our own debt issues, look at our own bills that have to get paid, and look at our own balanced budget that we're forced to do by Constitution, there are some great examples that can be used from our state to help the United States itself really try to repair what's going on. Additionally, I think whenever you're trying to do change of this substance, it has to start on a grassroots level, and really has to start with people back home who can tell their congressmen, listen, we're going to hold you accountable for what's going on, because at the end of the day, regardless of whatever your national aspirations are, you're a congressman, you're a senator, you're whoever, you're elected from here, and the people who live here who elect you are tired of it.
It's absolutely a nonpartisan effort made up of members of all major parties, but 300,000 individual citizens have signed a petition on the coalition webpage requesting that Congress and the President work on these tasks. There are 23 chapters that from 23 different states, one of which is the state of Louisiana, and that coalition is growing each and every day. It's made up of business people. It's made up of elected officials. It's made up of grassroots volunteers and citizens, people really from across the spectrum who recognize that although that Congress and the President were able to avoid that fiscal cliff at the very end of 2012 and the beginning of 2013, there's a lot of work left to be done. Here in Louisiana, if the sequestration cuts go into effect and those things are still looming on the horizon, we stand to lose 28,000 jobs here in Louisiana and up to 6.6% of our total state revenue, which would come in the form of federal government grants, money that we as a state allocate through our legislature and through our budget process every year. 6.6% of our revenue would be approximately $1 billion. And so it's a significant number, and certainly the 28,000 jobs are significant not only to those families that it would impact, but also to all of the citizens of this state. We want to be in a posture where we're growing the economy, growing jobs, putting our businesses in the right posture to be successful and to employ people here in the state of Louisiana. And the cuts that are looming on the horizon, if a more comprehensive deal isn't reached, are really a huge detriment to people here in the state of Louisiana.